Hello, and welcome to today's AWS Industry Council discussion, a platform for industry leaders to share insights and collaborate. My name is Anurag Saluja from Retail Team at AWS. And before we begin, I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And before I really start this conversation with my esteemed guest today, I'd like to really set some context. Let's set some context before I introduce my guest for today. When people think about retail or consumer brands, they often think about product quality, customer experience, shopping experience, and so on and so forth. But what they don't often see is what happens behind the scenes, the systems, the processes, and what keeps people safe, that reduces risks, and also enabling the leadership in engaging and ensuring that businesses meet their legal obligations. Now, what we're going to talk about today is exactly that. We are focusing on that side of the story, how two leading organizations are using technology to improve safety, manage risks, and meet Australia's growing compliance requirements. I'm pleased to welcome the panel with me today. Meet Andrew Wilson, Head of Health and Safety at Blackmores Group Australia, one of the leading brands in health. He is with us. And then we also have Stu Cameron, who is founder and the CEO of Unifii, which is a leading Australian technology company and also an AWS partner that is helping large organizations to run safer, more compliant and efficient operations through its Operations Cloud platform. Gentlemen, welcome to the session today, and I'm going to start with you, Andrew. Tell us something more about Blackmores. It's obviously, everybody knows that it's a household brand in Australia, and it's very active in health and well-being of individuals. Tell us the safety, the compliance, and the workforce aspect, which remains hidden from people like us, who are the usual shoppers.
More than happy to, Anurag. I think most of the dealings Blackmores has is as a brand name, but behind the name is that we're actually the Australian company that we source the product, we manufacture the product, we pack it ourselves. All our supply chain logistics is handled in-house, so we have a diverse workforce, and then we obviously have our corporate offices, we have our sales teams. So we run the whole gamut of all organisations, from production all the way through to the end user. So for us to be safe, we cross everyone, and we have to be aware of our trending data. We also have to look at how do we get a massive market that is very diverse. What suits a salesperson doesn't always suit a person that works in a factory, on our packing line, or in our logistics plant. And to do that, you have to have a system that is relevant, that it crosses all those boundaries. We also are representative in 12 markets internationally, so we also have to encompass their culture, their reporting components, and also their knowledge of how do we get that message across into their languages and their understanding. So it's a broad range that we're going to look at all times.
Right. And with all these complexities you cater to or you deal with in day-to-day business, have they changed over the last few years or so with increasing compliance and regulations from Australia and maybe the relevant countries where you sell in?
Most definitely. I've been there now for 4.5 years, and it was a typical scenario: spreadsheets, reporting data that was actually brought in. With all that kind of data, you actually don't have verification processes in place. Spreadsheets can be lost, they can be actually chopped and changed. So for a compliance governance tool, you need something that is across the board, and it's actually live data. You have to be able to trust the data that you present, and to do that you need a system that crosses all those borders, international, domestic, but you also have to make certain that those systems are easy to understand. And part of that process was I look for a bespoke system. And the idea of that bespoke system is, how do you make it short, sharp and simple to use for the person who's going to do the reporting? The end user, which is normally my team, so WHS professionals, we want to see what data comes in so that we can look at trending, what avenues have we got to prepare. But if we can actually see data that comes in, it might not be in a correct format, but at least the data is there, it's recorded. We can then do our reporting analysis. That then is able to be reported up through our senior management. So obviously you've got our normal company KPIs, so anything along those kind of lines, the basics you always have to look at. But we found that to make those kind of ideals better in regard to how does it reporting look, you want something that is giving you raw data that is clear data. You don't need any of the fancy components that make up all too many charts, pie charts, or along those kind of lines. If you can get actual hands-on information, you can then design what you want so that the business gets the appropriate level. Because if you're a business that's come from a spreadsheet, to come in with a whole series of charts, graphs and reporting timelines, most of that gets lost in the delivery. So you actually want to bring the business along as you're actually building the system at the same time, because it is new. And we're an amalgamation, so we'd only just recently purchased a manufacturing plant, and that was prior to COVID, so they'd sort of not had a lot of interaction. They had their own system, so we were trying to incorporate a new system at the time, and it was how do you actually bring something in? So that made it even more imperative. It has to be easy to implement, and it has to be easy for the end user. Because at the end of the day, if the end user can't use it, then you're not going to get that data. And by the end user, I might mean it might be a salesperson who's had a motor vehicle accident. They might have had something very minor, through to a factory worker that's actually had a more serious incident, where we've now got it designed. It can be through mobile phones, can be through iPads. We've got iPads through our site to make it easy for people to report. And that data is instant, so it's got the hierarchy chart in regards to if it's the scale of seriousness gets escalated through to the supervisors, through to the WHS team, through the general manager. So you don't actually need a link in there if you've got the hierarchy set up appropriately, which we found with the Unifii system. And again, it's a bit of that sort of, how would I put it, you have to be able to amend it when it's not working correctly. So no system can you get brought in that's going to go great off the shelf. It just doesn't happen. Each site's a little bit different in how do they report, what kind of information do they want. We tailor a lot of our information to the different sites, and we ask a lot more of our larger sites because that's our reporting structures.
That's really interesting insight around the reporting aspect and how that gets escalated. Now, I'm going to come to you, Stu, if that's okay. I think one of the aspects which we just heard from Andrew was around the compliance aspect, the reporting aspects. Now, that's one business, massively complex. You, as an organization, work with so many other businesses as well, which have, I'm sure, similar challenges or even different challenges. Please enlighten us on those as well. I think it'd be great to add that mix from wider industry from your side.
We're at a crossroads in history. We have, on the one side, the most incredible technology now available to enterprises to be able to do all sorts of things. We have a regulatory and compliance environment now which is more onerous than ever. Enterprises are now on the hook for making sure that their enterprises are safe, that they run efficiently and effectively. And there is a schism. In most organisations that we see, there is simply not the technology enablement or engagement that is going to allow the sort of real-time data that's going to meet the regulatory and compliance obligations. At the same time as improving the business, principles of operational excellence are very important now. And there is a massive gap. And in almost every enterprise that we see, we still find that there is a very heavy reliance on paper-based processes, Excel spreadsheets, SharePoint for document management, and putting that together and try to run real-time data is almost impossible. We've had 50 or 60 years now of technology enablement for knowledge workers. So if you sit in a cubicle, you've got all the technology you're ever going to need to do your job. The closer you get to the front line, particularly in a diverse environment like Blackmores, the closer you get to the front line, the less technology enablement there is for workers. So if you're trying to get culture change, if you're trying to get behaviours which are safer in the workplace, enabling them, the workers, with technology to allow them to do the right business processes at the right time in the right way is difficult unless you've got a platform that enables it. And Unifii Operations Cloud was designed from the ground up to get everybody, including contractors and third parties, part of the same technology ecosystem so that you can start to regulate the flow of information to a worker, to a frontline person, and back into the enterprise. So those two things are happening, massive amounts of technology, but also at the same time we're seeing every regulator in Australia now upping the ante and making, in many cases, for the first time, directors are now directly and personally liable. We've seen the fines and the penalties change enormously in the last few years. So there's a lot going on and a lot of change is required.
And when you go from one customer to another, I'm sure you'll see the variation in the requirements, right? So how does the platform or how does your solution or how does your approach cater to that peculiar requirement from a given customer?
It's absolutely critical to focus on that. The regulations are the same for everybody.
Yeah.
But I've never seen two businesses that are the same. You could have two manufacturing organisations in the same market manufacturing very similar products, but the way they function culturally in terms of business processes, the way that various parts of the value chain fit together can be completely different. So this idea that you could throw a bit of software at them and take a common regulatory framework and make that work in different businesses is a complete fallacy. So you have to be able to configure, you have to be able to make sure that whatever you're building, whatever application or workflow or business process or data set that you're doing for that enterprise suits the business. I mean, the history of technology and particularly software has been that engineers create the software, they throw it over the fence to the customer, then the customer has to change their business to suit the software. Our philosophy is completely inverted. Unless you can meet the needs of the business, the way that the business wants to function, needs to function, then you're only doing half the job. So our whole approach to technology and to digital transformation is to focus on the user and the business first, and we work backwards from there.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. So just to flip it to yourself again, Andrew, if that's and that's probably the right time to ask you about the cusp or the turning point at which you decide, okay, we are going to go ahead and have a platform or a cloud or a solution, operation solution, which kind of caters to our requirements. What was that moment when you decide that? Was it like an incident or was it challenging, becoming too insurmountable for you? Kind of what instigated you to do that?
I think it's a multi-pronged approach that you've got to look at. So take WHS, it's a risk management function. We talk about work health and safety. It's really risk management 101. How do you make a business safe for the workers, for all employees of all different job descriptions? And how then do you satisfy a compliance piece within that business? How do you satisfy a compliance piece for a regulator and your reporting requirements? But how do you also then build confidence in the system that you look at? So it's not so much that it was a turning point, it's a matter of if you want to meet those requirements, you need a business or a system that works with you, because if you buy something off the shelf or out of the box, you've got to adapt to that particular process. Does not work in that regard. It just makes life very hard because you're changing people's approach of how do they want to actually report something, how do we want to see the data. To Stu's point there before, no two businesses are the same. Yes, we all do similar type processes, but location and culture dictate how you're actually going to work it. I don't know of any business yet that I've ever worked for that doesn't want the easiest, most simple system to use. But then on the other end of it, you also want the most appropriate data quickly, and you actually want it accurate, and you want to do as least amount of work to get it in the format that you require it. And once that process is in place, that you just use the old, it's a checkbox scenario. What does a business need? And what is the easiest way to get that implemented? But then how do you amend or adapt that system, not adapt the business to make the ends meet?
Right. It seems like you approached this more proactively because you felt that there was a need to really address this with that solution in place. Now, solution is a technology solution, as you said, and there is always this business on the left hand, and they've got technology on the right hand side, and then there are processes, between the people as well. How did you manage so many kind of moving discs as you implemented this solution?
It's the whole process of a business case scenario. So you actually put down your list of requirements, then you have to go around and talk to all the different suppliers, and you soon pick up what system that you want to use. It's not so much that one particular system ticks 120 boxes out of 130. It's how adaptable and how do you think you can work with them as a whole moving forward, because this isn't a one-off situation. You just don't want to buy it and then not have it work. You want a long-term solution with this. You want a long-term relationship with the suppliers, so that as the business grows, the system also grows.
Right.
An example of that is 4 and a bit years ago, AI wasn't even around in regard to it. Whereas now I'm talking to Stu in regard to how do I get AI incorporated for predictive analysis? How do you make the system even more intuitive from the amount of rich data that we've got there? How do we start getting more and more ahead of the game, so that we're not just doing the same, okay, we've had an issue, we fixed it, we put a solution in place. How do we start to predict that maybe we've got other areas that could cause us those kind of problems? Because we all use multiple tools to implement trending data, and the selling piece from the business case was, how do we move forward with a business or a supplier that is going to adapt to our needs? And that's where we settled from that point onwards.
Yeah. I think you've just touched upon AI, without which no conversation is complete now. So, but I'm going to ask you that question later. But let me just first ask you about the success aspect. Like when you implement a solution like a unified cloud platform, what was the approach you took? How did you start in terms of the tech integration, the business, demonstrating the value as well? All of that step. So just give us a bit of a down on that one as well.
The technology's got to come second.
Yeah.
We've got a tremendous toolkit.
Yeah.
We've built an amazing platform that takes advantage of all of the latest tools and technologies from AWS, best practice around user engagement.
Yeah.
You talked about AI, we talked about data fabric earlier on. These are all just tools. You can give a layman the appropriate tool, but they won't have the skills to use it. So we always start in what I consider to be the right location, which is to ask the business what they're actually trying to do. What are the business objectives? What are the mission critical business objectives that we have to meet in order to satisfy the business requirements? We start there and we work backwards. We assume that we've got the right tools and technologies to be able to solve the problem. I think all too often in the technology sector, we start with the technology and move forward. We start with the end user and the business requirements, and then we build back from there. And we're not satisfied until we have asked the customer, and particularly the business users, all the really difficult questions, all the ones that they haven't yet thought about. Because there's a lot of assumptions that come to problem solving. So we have to challenge all of those. So we're not just bringing a platform, we're also bringing a bunch of disciplines around business process re-engineering and digital transformation, understanding operational excellence and the principles of business improvement. You put that together, you ask the right questions, you're never afraid to ask the difficult questions. You've actually got a reasonable chance of meeting the requirements of the business. So by the time you get into production, you've got something that actually looks like what the business really needs. And that approach has worked with us, for us very, very well. We've done now over 500 projects for large-scale enterprises. And that methodology works very, very well and satisfies the business.
And when it comes to measuring the kind of the business benefits, right? Was there a metric you start off with, and if yes, then are you okay to share some kind of highlights of that in all possible confidential ways?
Yes. To me, there's a whole value engineering piece around this. There are costs eliminated. If you can automate a business process using digital technology that used to take 45 minutes and you've cut that down to 90 seconds, you've got an immediate cost saving. So there are hard cost savings, there are soft cost savings, there's risks avoided, there are improvements to the business that might actually increase efficiency, so more output for less cost. And in any sort of customer engagement, any time that we sit down with a business, we're trying to understand where the value metrics actually sit. very often there's a primary problem to solve. We need to reduce risk, but you've got to unpack that to understand what that really means. And if at the same time you can reduce a risk, you can give a greater degree of data visibility to the business. If we can start to do predictive analytics, and we can also improve efficiencies, and we can start to cut the process times down from minutes, hours or days to seconds, then you get really substantial benefits to the business. And also, at the core of this, there's a really important principle. If we can eliminate the risk of one injury or one death in the workplace, then it's all worthwhile. It's fine to be focused on business metrics, but if we can make workplaces safer, as well as being more efficient, then I think we've absolutely hit what I would consider to be the primary objectives.
And I think one of the important aspects, Stu, probably it's something for you, Andrew, to share your views on, is the change, the business change, because you talked about Excel sheets. Now it's proper, very mature data fabric, which is helping you pop all your reports up, all your compliance bits up. How did you bring the change? I know you started off, and then we probably switched to benefits quickly. How did you manage all that change with so many complications behind it?
I think you've just got to work out what your business needs or wants, and you've got to start small, and you've got to sell that it's a value-add tool, because it's just another tool to a business where they've already got a lot of tools there, and every time you ask someone to put a report in, it takes time. So you have to make certain that when you actually sell the communications, there's a benefit to them coming back. Now, do they always see the benefit? No, but you actually have to build that, I suppose it's the confidence in the data that comes in, because initially you end up with a bulk of data that you don't normally have. So every other business I've been in that we've implemented systems, instead of the senior management always think, we're always going to have a decrease. Whereas my experience is you always have an increase because people start to report more. You're starting to see different scenarios. There's common themes that start to come out. You ask them more appropriate questions that come along the lines. How do you actually get more? Then you want more, but then the team actually wants more. The supervisors want to know why. So it's a matter of how do you keep getting that information flow, and without them even realising it, they're actually the people that are driving the system. And there's nothing better than someone coming to you after a period of time saying, we've really got safety under control. I haven't got it under control. They have, because they're using the tools. If safety for us really works when it's owned. And because they're getting the appropriate data, they can actually see that. Probably a good example of that is we've just done some investigation training, and doing that with the supervisors, one of them actually came out and said, we've come leaps and bounds in the last couple of years to where we were, and we've done such a good job as the supervisors. There's no better compliment in the background because they own it. They don't think that we've done it. To be a good risk manager, you shouldn't be the person that's always at the front because the forms work. It's because they've taken it on board and they want to drive it themselves. We utilise the tool in the last probably 18 months, 2 years now, on how do we change our safety culture. So we use the thing through our through talks. We actually record. We tasked every site with doing appropriate number of safety interactions every week. Every business, once you bring in a process like that, they grumble about it. This is more work. What am I going to get out of it? So you sell that next avenue is you started the conversation. But for me to be fully compliant with it, I want to know that you've done the conversation because I want you to record it. So after 6 months, you then start to check how much content are we getting? Is there just a lot of narrative, or are we starting to build up and we're starting to get more meaningful conversations? Is there a corresponding decrease in regard to our injuries or knowledge of those processes? We can then trend that data because it's recorded, and if we need to verify it, it's a very simple process of going back. Hey, did you actually have this conversation? Can you remember the conversation? They go, yes. And they actually want to come forward with topics that they then obviously bring through the system, which then comes into our area that we might want to look at a different program because they've identified something that we hadn't actually seen. Our information flow is only as good as our reports that we get and our workforce. So we have a lot of employees that are 20, 30, up to 40 years tenure. They know what the process looks like. their inherent knowledge of something that could go wrong, we need that information to come into us through inspections, through safety interactions. We utilise this tool to extract that data so that we can then put a stopgap measure in place or eliminate the process if and when needed.
Yeah. So I think I take it that the change was more brought in by including those change agents, put it that way, and empowering them to drive the change in a way, right?
Most definitely. Your whole workforce is your change agent. I can go and give them a document that's 500 pages long. I know they won't look at it, but the idea of the safety culture is short, sharp, simple documents. The information flow comes through our reports and where we're going. And if we can trend that and data log it, if we need support, or we need our compliance piece, it's already contained within the system because it's there. People just don't realise how much rich data that we have that we extract out of it.
And what I really want to extract two things from your last two answers. One was the AI and the predictive analytics aspect you talked about, and the second thing was now now that you've set the scene or set the tone of the organization in a kind of a more proactive approach to risk management and safety, I think you're getting a lot of new ideas, new requirements from your peers coming to you and saying, what about this process improvement? What about that process improvement? And that's where, Stu, probably a question for you. What other things, or what is your plan for catering to such requirements, which could be leveraging generative AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning concepts? What are your plans to bring that in? And if you have, feel free to share a couple of ideas which could probably enthrall the audience as well.
The first mistake when you're trying to bring about change in an organisation is to view something as a technology problem. These are people problems. An enterprise is made up of people who are doing activities for the benefit of the business and the shareholders, but ultimately it's a people problem. So if you start solving people problems and then using the appropriate tools and technologies to do that, you've got a much better shot at getting an outcome. I think all too often people start with the wrong framing. And AI to me is a really good example of this. It's another tool. I mean, for 45 years I've seen the latest and greatest tool, and there's been some fantastic tools, and I'm a great believer in AI. AI is only as good as the data that you can put in. And one of the advantages that we have with Unifii Operations Cloud is that we're collecting vast quantities of primary, secondary and metadata. That data is going into a data lake. And very often when we first start having conversations with our customers about what data is or what information is, there is either a misunderstanding or a complete lack of understanding of not only how rich that data can be, but what it actually is. So if we can have a lot of primary, secondary and metadata, we can then use AI, and are using AI, and the next release of our platform will have this built into it, to be able to mine that data and start to correlate things that might not even occur to you as being related. So if you're looking at risk management, if you can map vast quantities of data, what happened, what processes were executed, who was doing what in what location, AI and generative AI is fantastic at being able to put things which are seemingly disconnected together. And where we're going to get to is a point where we'll be able to actually ask the AI to start to predict some of the outcomes. Correlating all of this information, what is the risk that you've identified that we didn't pick up on? That's a massive game changer. That is something that will bring to life predictive analytics. But AI is useless if you don't have the data. We've got vast amounts of data, using AI tools and technologies to be able to interrogate that data, report on it, and predict things. That is immensely powerful, and we're very excited about that possibility. And we've already got a beta release going for this technology, and we very much see this as part of the future of the platform.
Fantastic. That's great. And that's really, really helpful, actually. We started from the compliance, we started from the basic requirements around a solution like this, and we've come to where we are around Gen AI usage. That's fantastic. Now, I think before we really get to probably the closure of this conversation, I'm really keen to have each of you sharing some key takeaways before we end the conversation. So probably starting with you, Andrew, again. Probably a couple of 2 or 3 key takeaways for the audience.
I think that the biggest one for me is we're all time poor, more so this day and age. The tool that you actually use, so whatever system you're going to bring into place, has to give you time back. This one most definitely does. it comes back to us in spades in regard to data richness, data flow, the ease of extracting that data, but also in regards to how do we actually do your monthly KPI reporting. What's the system like there? We used to lose days in trying to get a monthly report, whereas now we've done it in hours and probably less using our Power BI components. Information is extracted. So that part of it, massive time savings. Ease of use is the second one. But I think that the biggest part is people want more. Once they see the data flow come through, they say, if you can supply that, can we get this? It's what they want is when we go back to Stu and his team, how do we actually get more out of what we've got? Okay. And whilst ever that continues to grow, you're always going to have a success with data that comes in because they're happy to use it, because they're really happy with the data that comes back out at the other end. Interesting.
Thanks very much for that, really, Andrew. And Stu, your view on the key takeaways, or probably something to leave behind?
This is a very exciting time. I imagine if you had a conversation with somebody in 1995 and said, imagine a world of iPhones and Android phones and the internet, it would be impossible for them really to imagine what that world would look like. And I think we're probably there again. The introduction of AI, data fabric, data lake, all of these sorts of technologies is going to give us a massive acceleration over the next 10 to 20 years and start to really solve some of the intractable problems that we have in running businesses and enterprises. But if you forget to focus on people, if you forget to focus on the business, if you frame the problem as purely as a technology problem, I think you're solving the wrong problem and you can't take advantage of all of these changes. If you do focus on those things, you've got a really good shot at actually making sure that businesses are safer, that they're more efficient, they're more effective, that they're improving all the time, and that the risks are being reduced for those businesses. But you've got to focus on the people and the business and use the appropriate tools in the right way.
Yeah, so I'm just taking both of you, summarizing it. It's people, process, and technology. I think that's the right combination where we sort of start from and really cater to. So that's great. With that, I think it's clear from today's discussion that investing in risk management and compliance in retail operations are critical to the success of any large retail organization. I think digital tools, when used well and combined with the right leadership and investment in change management, can make a real difference. Andrew and Stu, thank you very much indeed for your time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and have been able to gather some insight to apply to your businesses or to your customers' businesses. Please reach out to Unifii or Blackmore for any further information that you may require. Thank you once again.